Wesley had called it a bargain. 100-acre spread for just a single gold coin. He'd chuckled, clapping Torrin Greystone on the shoulder like he was handing over a kingdom. Place is weathered, needs work. But it's yours, free and clear. Nobody's been there in ages. Torrin, a towering figure known as the Giant Boy of Duskvale, wasn't one to trust in fortune. Standing taller than any man, his shadow stretched long across the fields. After years of hauling timber and sleeping in rough lodges, the thought of owning land, a place to call his own, had rooted deep in his chest. So he signed the deed, gripped Wesley's hand, and by dusk he held the keys to the Shadowmere Ranch. The wind wailed through the crags of the Iron Ridge Hills as Torrin trudged up to the house the next morning. The place was a wreck, sagging shutters, a fence half swallowed by the earth, a chimney crumbling like old bones. But the soil was rich, the fields wide. He could build something here. Torrin tethered his mule and stepped onto the creaking porch, his massive boots shaking the boards. The door groaned under his push, revealing a haze of dust thick as fog. The floorboards protested under his weight, and spiderwebs draped every rafter. Still it was his. He worked until twilight, unloading gear and clearing the worst of the grime. The house seemed to sigh, as if it hadn't been touched in a generation. Exhausted, Torrin spread a blanket in the main room and let sleep claim him. But before dawn, something stirred him awake. A noise. Not the house settling. Not the wind. A faint scrape, a shuffle, then the dull thump of footsteps. Torrin's eyes snapped open, his heart thumping like a war drum. He grabbed the heavy axe by his side and rose, his head nearly brushing the ceiling, then crept toward the back door. The sound came again, from the barn. Coat thrown over his shoulders, Torrin stepped into the chilly pre-dawn air, his breath clouding. The barn door hung slightly ajar. He eased it open with the axe handle, the scent of moldy hay and weathered wood hitting him. His eyes adjusted to the dimness, and there, in a corner, he saw her. A girl, no older than 12, curled in a nest of straw like a frightened animal. Her arms were wrapped tight around herself, a tattered shawl pulled close. Her face was smudged with dirt, her hair a tangled mess. Her boots were worn thin, and beside her lay a dented tin cup and a cracked jug, empty. Torrin lowered his axe, his shadow looming over her. The girl stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She froze, staring up at his towering frame, but her gaze held no panic, just a weary acceptance. "You gonna chase me off?" she asked, her voice small but steady. Torrin's brows furrowed. "Who are you?" "Name's Lila," she said. "I ain't taken nothing. Been here a couple days, that's all. I'll go if you want." Torrin crouched, his knees creaking, and studied her. She didn't seem like trouble, just a kid who'd been running too long. "Where's your kin?" Lila's jaw tightened. She looked away. "Gone," she said after a pause. "Long gone." "Why this barn?" She shrugged. "Looked abandoned. Needed somewhere dry. Didn't know someone claimed it." Torrin let out a slow breath. He'd come for solitude, for a chance to build a life on his own terms. Not to take in strays. "Anyone after you?" Lila shook her head. Torrin stood, his head brushing the barn's low beams. "Get inside. Too cold out here?" Her eyes widened, disbelieving. "You mean it? You deaf? Move." His voice was gruff, but not unkind. Lila scrambled up, clutching her shawl, and followed Torrin's massive strides across the frost-dusted yard. Inside the house, Torrin tossed logs into the hearth, the firelight casting his giant shadow across the walls. He pointed to a chair. Lila sat gingerly, eyeing the creaking room like it might swallow her. Torrin poured a mug of cold tea from a kettle and slid it across the table. "It's bitter, but it's something." Lila took it with both hands, sipping slowly. Then she reached into her patched coat and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. A stale biscuit hard as a rock. "Been holding on to this," she said, offering it. "You want half." Torrin stared. This girl, who had nothing, was offering to share her last scrap. Something stirred in his chest, heavy and unfamiliar. "Keep it," he said, turning to the stove. "I'll cook some porridge." As the sun broke over the Iron Ridge Hills, Torrin learned fragments of Lila's story. a runaway, orphaned by fever, drifting from town to town. She'd found the barn by chance, seeking shelter from the coming winter. Torin listened, stirring the pot, his giant hands steady. The ranch was his dream, but maybe it could be more than just his. Lila's parents had perished 2 winters ago in a fever that swept through the village of Crestfall. Since then, she'd drifted, boarding houses, travelers' camps, a few ranches that turned her away after a week. Some folks had struck her, others ignored her. None kept her. She'd been wandering when she stumbled upon the Shadowmere Ranch, following the crooked fence line until she slipped into the barn. "I can work," Lila said abruptly as Torin scrubbed a pot, his massive hands dwarfing the task. I know mules. I can shovel dirt, clean stalls." "Slow down," Torin cut in, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. Lila froze, her shoulders hunching as if bracing for dismissal. "You don't need to prove yourself this second." Lila's cheeks reddened. I don't want to leave." Torin turned, his towering frame filling the kitchen. "A ranch ain't a place for handouts. You stay, you work." "I'm not running a shelter." Lila nodded fast. "Yes, sir. I'll do my part." A long pause hung between them. Then Torin asked, "You got a name besides Lila?" She blinked. "Just Lila." "Well, Lila, let's see how long you stick around." That afternoon, they got to work. Torin led her to the tool shed, showed her the stable, and demonstrated how to work the stiff well pump. Lila listened intently, nodding, asking sharp questions. She was quick, Torin noted, her small hands moving with purpose. By evening, she'd cleaned 3 stalls, stacked firewood taller than herself, and helped Torin mend a porch rail. As the sun sank below the Iron Ridge Hills, they sat at the rough-hewn table, eating porridge and smoked fish by the flicker of an oil lamp. Lila stifled a yawn behind her mug. "You'll sleep inside tonight," Torin said. "Back room's dusty, but it beats straw." Lila nodded, eyes wide. "Thank you." She hesitated, then stood. "Good night, Mr. Greystone." Torin glanced up from his mug. "Just Torin." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Good night, Torin." She shuffled down the hall, her footsteps light against the creaking floor. Torin sat for a long while, the house's groans mingling with the wind sweeping across the plains. He'd come to Shadowmere for solitude, but now a girl slept in his back room, and somehow, it felt right, like the first roots of something new taking hold. The first true morning at Shadowmere Ranch broke crisp and sharp. Torin was up before dawn, his massive boots thudding across the yard as the rooster crowed. He half expected Lila to have vanished, slipped off into the hills or back to whatever nowhere she'd come from. But as the sun crested the ridge, there she was, wrestling with a water bucket that sloshed against her knees, her small frame straining under the weight. "Pump giving you trouble?" Torin called, striding over, his shadow swallowing her. Lila huffed. "No, it's fine. Just heavy. I'll manage." Torin raised an eyebrow. Her coat was threadbare, barely reaching her hips, and her fingers were chapped red from the frost. But she didn't complain. He hefted the second bucket with one hand. "You will." They fed the chickens and checked the fence line, sagging from a recent storm. Torin handed Lila a mallet and a handful of iron nails, watching as she set to work. "Ever done this before?" She shook her head, positioning a board. "No, but I've seen it." Torin crossed his arms, his giant frame looming. Her swings were careful, her alignment precise for a beginner. Not bad for a barn rat from yesterday. They worked through the morning. As the air warmed, Lila shed her coat, sweat beading on her forehead. Her shirt clung to her back, but she kept pace. At noon, they rested under a gnarled oak by the well. Torin passed her a hard biscuit from a tin and poured water from his canteen. Lila tore into it, her hunger plain but unspoken. "You ever go to school?" Torin asked. Lila shrugged. "A bit. Ma taught me letters. Pa tried numbers, but he wasn't much better than me." "You read a sign?" "Most of 'em." Torin nodded. "We'll work on that." Lila stared at her boots, her voice barely a whisper. You really want me here?" Torin met her gaze, his eyes steady. "Said you could stay if you work. You're holding up so far." Lila exhaled, a mix of relief and something fiercer, like hope. Over the next week, they fell into a rhythm. Lila rose at dawn, matched Torin's chores, and absorbed every lesson like parched earth drinking rain. She wasn't strong, her arms shook after hauling feed or swinging a shovel, but she was stubborn. At night, they sat by the hearth, Torin sharpening tools while Lila scratched letters on old paper scraps, her brow furrowed in focus. Lila's letters were wobbly, but they were improving. One evening, after a grueling day mending fences, Torin handed her a small leather pouch. Inside was a pocket knife, old but polished, with a smooth bone handle. "Was mine when I was young," Torin rumbled, his voice like rolling stones. "Take care of it. Use it proper." Lila's eyes shone like stars. "You mean it? Still got all my fingers, don't I?" Lila grinned, tracing the handle with her thumb. "Thank you, Torin. I'll keep it safe." But not everyone in Duskvale warmed to Torin's new arrangement. A week later, they trekked into town for supplies, Lila's first return since settling at Shadowmere. Her shoulders stiffened as they crossed the dusty thoroughfare of Cinder Street. Eyes followed them. An old man outside the mercantile snorted. "Well, look at that. Greystones taken in a stray." Torin's gaze turned to ice, but he kept walking. Inside the store, the clerk, Mrs. Verna Hollis, eyed them with a mix of curiosity and pursed-lipped judgment. "Didn't figure you for hiring help, Greystone," she said, tallying up their flour and salt. "Trying something new," Torin replied, his tone clipped. Her eyes flicked to Lila, who stood quietly, hands clasped behind her. "You feeding her right? Looks like a stiff wind'd blow her away." "She's fine," Torin said, voice flat. Lila stared at the floor, cheeks flushing. On their way out, Torin rested a massive hand on her shoulder. "Ignore it. They talk? 'Cause it's easier than working." "Do they hate me?" Lila asked, voice small. Torin sighed. "They don't know you. That's all." Lila nodded, silent until they were well beyond the town's edge. Back at Shadowmere, she threw herself into chores with renewed fire. Torin watched one evening as she wrestled a hay bale nearly as tall as she was, face red, teeth gritted. "Don't break yourself," he called. "Work smart, not hard. Use the hook." Lila wiped her brow and flashed a grin. "One day, I'll lift it without the hook. You do that, I'll get you a whole roast." Her smile widened. Then her eyes caught something on the horizon. She pointed. "Riders. 2 coming fast." Torin turned, squinting. Dust trailed 2 figures galloping toward the ranch's edge. His jaw tightened. "Stay close." The men reined up in the yard. Torin knew them. Dren Barlow and Vance Cade, hands from a nearby spread notorious for thieving more than hurting. "Greystone," Dren called, smirking. "Heard you're playing nursemaid to a stray. That your business?" Torin's voice was low, dangerous. Vance spat. "Just saying you take in strays, don't cry when they bring trouble." Torin didn't flinch. "Ride out while I'm still civil." The men shared a look, then wheeled their horses. "We'll be back," Dren said with a sneer. Lila watched them go. "Who were they?" "Trouble," Torin said. "But nothing we can't handle." "I ain't scared," Lila said, her voice firm. Torin glanced at her, noting the steel in her eyes. "But no need for heroics, though." That night, under a sky blazing with stars over the Iron Ridge Hills, Torin sat on the porch, honing a blade. Lila joined him, wrapped in a blanket, clutching the pocket knife like a talisman. "You ever think about running off again?" Torin asked. Lila shook her head. "Not once." Torin nodded. "Then we've got work to do." She smiled. He gave a rare half-smile back, and in the quiet dark, Shadowmere felt alive, no longer just a patch of land but a home taking shape. The next morning dawned heavy with storm clouds. Lila woke to the howl of wind against the shutters and the scent of smoke from the hearth Torin had already lit. Outside, the hills loomed gray and restless. A storm was brewing, and every creature on the ranch seemed to feel it. "Boots on," Torin called from the doorway. "We've got fences to check before the wind tears 'em down." Lila rubbed her eyes and tugged on her coat. She'd never known a life where someone roused her for honest work, and strange as it was, she liked it. They rode out together, checking the northern boundary first. Lila had grown steadier on horseback, riding Dusty, a sturdy mare who seemed to sense her cautious grit. She'd even named the barn cats, much to Torin's quiet amusement. As they reached a fence line near the ridge, Torin dismounted, his massive frame casting a shadow like a mountain. Lila followed, her boots sinking into the soft earth. The wind tugged at her hair, and the first drops of rain speckled the ground. Torin knelt to inspect a sagging post, then handed Lila a mallet. "We'll brace these before the storm hits. You know how." Lila nodded, gripping the tool. She'd learned fast, her hands steadier each day. As they worked, the sky darkened, and the wind grew sharper. Torin glanced at her, noting the determination in her small frame. She wasn't just a stray anymore, she was part of Shadowmere, and he'd be damned if he let anyone, or anything, take that away. "This stretch always buckles in a gale," Torin said, pointing to a sagging fence. "You hold, I'll hammer." Lila nodded, her small hands gripping the weathered boards as the wind whipped her coat and stung her face. Her fingers numbed, but she held steady while Torin's massive arms drove nails into place. They worked until their breaths puffed like smoke and their hands ached with cold. As they turned back, thunder growled in the distance. "Move fast," Torin muttered. "Storm's not playing." By the time they reached the ranch house, the sky was a roiling black, and rain fell like scattered stones. They stabled the horses, barred the barn, and sprinted for the house, soaked through. Lila laughed, a full, unguarded sound, her hair plastered to her face, boots squelching. Torin glanced at her, water dripping from his beard, and for the first time in years, the weight of solitude lifted. By the hearth, warmed by steaming bowls of barley stew and cornbread, Lila peered at the maps Torin spread across the table. "You think we can plant all this come spring?" Torin nodded. "If the soil holds, we'll fence it tight, rotate crops, and pull water from the stream. You ever worked a spread this big?" "Nope," Lila said, "but I've seen enough on other folks' land to know what sticks. This time, I want it done right." Torin leaned back. "What about here?" Lila pointed to a shaded patch near the treeline. "Good for potatoes. Shade keeps 'em cool." Torin raised an eyebrow. "You know potatoes? Worked a plot once. Man there had us dig and plant all season. Didn't pay me, but I learned his tricks." Torin's gaze softened with respect. "You keep surprising me, kid." Lila grinned. "I surprise myself." 3 days later, the storm broke. The land was sodden but intact. A few snapped branches, a toppled gate, and mud everywhere. Torin called it a win. They rode into Duskvale for nails, seed catalogs, and a new iron pan Torin had ordered. At the mercantile, Verna Hollis squinted as Lila helped Torin haul a sack of grain. "Girls still with you, huh?" "Yep," Torin said, voice even. "Just saying, not every stray stays true." "And not every opinion's worth hearing," Torin shot back, sharp as a blade. Lila kept her eyes down but stayed close. She didn't speak until they were back in the wagon. "You didn't have to say that." "Didn't do it for you," Torin said, glancing over. "Did it 'cause she's wrong." That night, Torin slid a leather-bound journal across the table. "Start tracking things, fence fixes, planting, rain days. Helps you know the land." Lila opened it, staring at the blank first page. "You sure? It's yours. Ranch needs managing. Start now." Lila gripped a pencil stub. "All right." The next week was their busiest yet. Torin taught Lila to mend harnesses, rotate feed stores, and split logs with clean swings. Her arms grew stronger, her cheeks less hollow, her smiles more frequent. She soaked up every lesson, asking sharp questions. But trouble, as it always did, came knocking. One evening, as supper simmered, hoofbeats echoed. Torin stepped outside to find Vance Cade, alone, astride a skittish horse. "Greystone," Vance called. "Heard you're still playing house with that orphan. Land's barely holding together as is." "Not your land, not your concern," Torin growled. Vance's eyes narrowed. "Just remember, some folks don't forget what strays are. That girl's trouble." You'll see. Torin took a step, his massive frame looming. One more word and you'll crawl home. Vance raised his hands, smirking. Testy, testy. He rode off. Lila watched from the window. They'll keep coming, won't they? Torin nodded. Maybe. But I'm not going anywhere. You neither. That night, Torin handed Lila a hat, wide-brimmed, weathered, a touch too big. Every ranch hand needs one. Lila's eyes widened. For me? Really? You earned it. She set it on her head, the brim slipping over her ears. I'll grow into it. Torin chuckled, a rare, deep sound. That's the plan. The next morning, the sky blazed with streaks of orange and gold. Lila was up before Torin for once, her small figure already in the yard, wrestling with a water bucket. Torin watched from the porch, the giant boy of Shadowmere no longer alone. The ranch wasn't just land anymore. It was theirs, built on sweat, trust, and something neither had expected, family. Lila stood in the pasture, a bucket of grain in her hands, calling softly to Dusty. The mare trotted over, her gait steady with trust. You finally teaching her to rise with you? Torin teased from the porch, his massive frame leaning against the rail. Lila grinned. More like she woke me. Think she was hungry? Torin nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Nearly 3 months had passed since Lila had crept into his barn, and something unspoken but solid had grown between them. They didn't name it, but it was there, in the way Torin entrusted Lila with his tools, how Lila checked the animals without prompting, or how she set 2 mugs of tea on the table each morning, even if one went cold waiting. Spring loomed, both a promise and a challenge. They had fields to plant, new fences to raise, irrigation to rig, and eyes to keep on those who wished them ill. That afternoon, while hauling posts, Lila spotted smoke on the ridge. Smoke. He squinted, his gaze sharpening. A single plume rose, too steady for a wildfire, too thick for a campfire. Stay here, he said. No chance, Lila shot back, her jaw set. I'm coming. Torin sighed. Saddle up. Stay behind me. They rode hard, the wind clawing at their coats. At the ridge, Torin cursed under his breath. The north pasture was ablaze, not a stray spark, but a deliberate fire, the dry grass burning fast. The flames licked toward the new fence they'd spent a week building. Torin leapt from his horse, beating at the fire's edge with his coat. Lila followed, fearless, choking on smoke. For 2 hours, they fought the blaze, ash stinging their eyes. When it was done, Torin coughed hard, and Lila's face was smeared with soot, but the fence held. The pasture was scorched but contained. They collapsed in the dirt, gasping. They did this, Lila said. Torin didn't reply immediately. Vance Cade, maybe Barlow too. Trying to run us off. It ain't working, Lila said, fierce. Back at the ranch, Lila bandaged a gash on Torin's arm from a jagged post. As she tied the cloth, she looked up. You'd fight him even if it got worse. Torin met her gaze. Already am. Not backing down. That week, Lila worked like a storm. Up before dawn, out past dusk, she repaired damage, shored up fences, and sowed seed rows with their meager stock. Torin gave her real tasks, not busy work, but the kind that said, I trust you. You're part of this. And Lila rose to it. One evening, as the sky deepened from indigo to black, Lila asked the question that had hung between them since the start. Why'd you let me stay? You didn't have to. Torin was silent for a long moment. Because I was you once. Not the same, but close. I know what it's like to sleep with one eye open, to think every hand's raised to strike, to feel invisible. Lila fidgeted with her hat's brim, eyes glistening. I never had a pa worth anything, she said quietly. You do now, Torin said. If you want one. Lila nodded, swallowing hard. I do. They sat in the twilight's hush, no more words needed. But the world wasn't finished with them. A week later, on a trip to Duskvale for salt blocks and mail, trouble found them. Vance Cade leaned against the mercantile, his sneer sharp. Thought you'd burned out by now, Greystone. Shame the fire missed. Torin stepped between Lila and Vance. That you're doing? Vance didn't answer directly. That girl ain't your kin. No right to raise her. Who I take in is my business. Vance stepped closer. Keep taking in strays, you'll lose that ranch. Lila moved before Torin could stop her, planting herself in front of him, her voice clear. You're wrong about me. I ain't a stray. I'm a rancher, and this is my home. The square went silent, townsfolk staring. Vance scoffed, but his confidence wavered. Lila didn't flinch. Torin's chest swelled with pride. They finished their errands and rode home, unbothered. That night, Torin tossed Lila a worn leather vest, one of his from years past. Might be big. Lila slipped it on, grinning. I'll grow into it. The months sped by in sweat and small triumphs. Seeds sprouted, livestock fattened, and the bond between Torin and Lila grew unshakable. Lila kept the journal diligently, sketching plans for the future. Torin taught her to shoot, not for harm, but for protection. The world might try to take from them, but they were ready. One evening, a letter arrived from the county. Torin opened it at the table. What is it? Lila asked. He smiled slowly. Deed expansions approved. The southern ridge is ours. Lila whooped, leaping from her chair. We're real ranchers now. Torin grinned. Always were. Now we've got the paper to prove it. With spring in full bloom, Shadowmere Ranch, once a hollow shell, thrived under two souls who'd been cast aside. They'd found each other, built something with grit and second chances, and knew, deep in their bones, no fire, no man, no storm could take it. This was their home, together.